Thank you, Jana. So it will be my turn now, my honor and my turn to present shortly every lecture of the one of the Global Award winners of this year. And the first lecture, will be the lecture of Mette Ramsgaard Thomsen from Copenhagen. Mette Ramsgaard, architect, founder and director of the CITA Laboratory, Center for Information, Technology and Architecture in the Royal Danish Academy of Copenhagen. When the Global Award was given in 1999, I remember, one of the winners was Thomas Herzog, a world-renowned expert in solar architecture, dear Mette, an inventor. He dedicated this prize to an expression of anger. He said, "Where are our laboratories, we architects?" 15 years after, at the time when the ecological crisis is forcing the entire construction line to innovate, where are the laboratories for architectural research in public research budget? Where are the architects in the industry laboratories? All too often, research into building and its future sees architects more as consumers than contributors. Architect Mette Ramsgaard Thomsen is widening the bridge opened by architects like Thomas Herzog, Philippe Samin, Werner Zobeck, and so all architects, inventors, patent filers. In 1926, she founded the Center for Information Technology and Architecture in Copenhagen as a place to explore both what architecture can become if technologically informed, and what architecture can contribute to scientific and technical research through its critical and creative tradition. CITA's work began with a study of classical materials, steel, wood, textile, plastic, and so on, with the aim of advancing their computer modeling, the knowledge on their properties, and their digital fabrication. Today, CITA is exploring living organic material, like those biopolymers, able to metabolize and to transform matters, to produce light, to produce energy. Mette is a student of Peter Cook. She will tell us what she is discovering about this living material, which resist and sustain differently, which adapt to the climate, by modifying themselves. As for she expects from the material of the 21st century, it's very simple, a permanent axiom of architecture. Dear Mette, I quote you. Our work seeks, by relying on the origin and properties of the material, simply freedom in design. So, dear Mette, the screen is yours.
Thank you so very, very much. Let me just get my screen sharing up here. I believe you should see the front. Am I right? I hope it's all good. I'm laughing a little bit because I see this great effort that you're all doing to speak English. Et moi, j'ai préparé mon discours en français parce que je voulais faire le même effort pour essayer d'être dans le contexte. But I have a feeling that that it is the correct language here will be to speak in English. Can I just be confirmed in this? Wow.
Yes.
I will. Yes. Yeah. Okay. I will give another discours in French. I've been preparing for another time. But first of all, I want to say how very pleased and honored that we are in CITA to receive this prize. I'm really, really sad to not come to Paris. I look very much forward to it. And I feel that when we meet physically, we become friends. When we meet virtually, we become associates. So I hope very much that we can find another time where we will be able to be in the same space. I look very much forward to seeing the presentations of my co-prize people, and I hope very much we find a moment to be in the same space. So I just need to find my there. In CETA, we're extremely proud to receive this prize. We're especially happy that it happens under the theme of experimentation. It is really the absolutely center core of our practice and our work over the last 15 years. CETA is a group of researchers that work together to discover how architecture can change once we work fundamentally and engage deeply with digital technologies. Over the last 15 years, we've been looking at different ways of working with digital architecture, digital fabrication, and new materials. The project Radicant, that is the project that's been nominated for this prize, or that has been looked at for this prize, is an experiment that looks at how architecture could change if we worked with biological or bio-based materials. Okay. I'm just having some mouse problems, so I'm trying to find my, I gotta use this one, yeah. Over the last 5 years, CETA has been working, turning our attention to bio-based materials as a way of understanding what sustainability could be, both as a way to think about how could the materials of architecture change, how could we work for a net zero architecture, but also more conceptually to widen our gaze and think about what happens when we stop thinking of us and nature as a dichotomy, but rather think of ourselves as being participating and part of the ecology through which resource is arriving. So working on the biological side of the butterfly diagram, if we look to circular design, is to try to think about how do we participate through practices of harvesting, of practices of growing, practices of nurturing. How do we participate in the built environment, in the making of that resource, and that our architecture itself becomes part of much larger circles of ecological and environmental change. This is, of course, a broader idea. We see a lot of IT understood as a way of thinking about optimizing material systems, using advanced simulation to think about different ways of describing optima. But what we're trying to do here is really to consider a much more networked relationship between self, environment, and the built space as part of these circles. So accepting that we are in a limited planet in which our resources take part in a closed system is to really fundamentally challenge what industrial production has been giving to us. I need to find my mouse here. Yes, Adam. Ah, you are not seeing my slides change,
No,
I see.
I'm sorry, yes, we don't see your slides.
Oh, so sorry. Okay, let me try to share screen again. I don't know how that happened.
Okay, we got it.
Yeah,
Yes,
right.
okay, thank you.
So anyway, I will go through the slides a little bit faster here to just, so this is who we are in CETA, our practice in CETA, and this is the project Radicant, in which we're trying to look at these biological systems and how architecture can more profoundly be part of these systems of return that biomass suggests to us. So what I'm trying to get at is that architecture is described by a new set of sensibilities, and that our task here in an age of sustainability is to find out how to activate those sensibilities and how to create an architectural ideation that is allowed to connect back to the resources that we work with. So rather than thinking of materials as something abstract that is delivered to us with no consequence except for cost and maybe a delivery schedule, then how can we think of a design practice that is aware of the resources it uses and the impacts on the ecologies and natures that they are part of. So coming back to this point of a limited planet, if we try to think ourselves as connected to the idea of a closed system, then how is it that architecture can be parts of systems of return? In our experiments, what we are trying to do is to develop new practices for resource thinking, for its conceptualization and analysis and its fabrication, to be able to connect different data streams across the ecological, the designerly, the analytic, and the fabrication-wise, to be able to connect back to understand how resources impacted. In Radicant, what we're doing is we're trying to work with bio-based materials that develop new principles of circularity. These materials are made of local materials, polymers such as collagen, fibers such as bark, wood flour, cotton, seagrass. They are brought together in different proportions and different ways that allow us to create a class of versatile materials in which materials can be constantly substituted. We look at how we can understand their characterization, how we can understand their principles of fabrication, how we can understand the composition and the design strategies that allow us to understand by what we are materializing architecture, how we're distributing material, and how we're deploying different resources, both at the scale of the overall, also at the scale of the single element, and down to the scale of the actual print path. What is at stake here is the idea of a new understanding of the behaviors and the performances of the material, understanding how they're changing over time and how they have different kinds of strength ratios than the technical materials that we are used to in architecture, such as fossil fuel-based plastics and fiberglass. This material has another logic. It has the logic of the recipe. It's also made with technologies that seem very cooking-like. Here, of course, more high-tech ways of weighing material, mixing material, and in the end, 3D printing material. What is arrived at is a material versatility that allows us to vary the material, not necessarily only in respect to an optimum, as we have been thinking about during modernity and the 20th century, but also in respect to what is locally available and what is a source that is abundant. We are interested in how these materials can be steered or maybe tuned in respect to an idea of resource availability. And what is perhaps the most important part of them is that they're always part of the biomass that they are part of, meaning that they're always engaged in processes of reconstruction, returning to the earth that they come from. We are interested in how these processes are structured, interested in monitoring the durability and their change in environment. We survey the different shape changes that are happening, the swelling, the fusing, and the cracking. We develop models by which we can understand and characterize these material changes to be able to understand how the materials operate in time. And not only to understand a sense of faiblesse, a failure, but rather to understand them, to try to work against the idea of architecture as something that has a fait accompli. It's something that just finishes the day the architect hands over the building, and instead propose a new kind of architecture that is continually constructed, continually mended, continually repaired as a much wider practice of building as an action that is durable. We're inspired by these materials and the way that they interact with local species. all to try to understand how the materials can become part of an architectural performance. So to return to this idea of sensitivity, what we're trying to examine here is really how we as architects can understand materials as they change and as they become and as they unbecome as part of an architectural cycle. These particular materials that I'm showcasing here are not new. They've been used for centuries across many different building cultures. What's interesting is that they have been forgotten during industrialization, where fossil fuel-based equivalents were much easier to control and to characterize. What I think is the opportunity here is that with our tools of computation, with our tools of machine learning, of data-driven monitoring, of being able to create time-based databases, we're able to create much more complex models of characterization that could maybe open new apertures to be able to work with these materials. So this experimentation is not singular in CETA. In CETA, we work across both technical and the biological. We try to understand how to model materials in high detail. We're interested in integrating the craft space and the digital, the steered, to create new hybrids that lie across this otherwise quite dichotic understanding of what is low-tech and what is high-tech. What we lean to is an idea about thinking what materials can be, also working with living materials that can change and that operate within the time zone, not of just duration, but also of life. What we want to do is to ask what could the relationship be between where we live and where our living is annexed into these ecological niches that are the places in which we are. So again, just to repeat, of course, we are extremely honored and extremely thankful for this prize. It means a lot to be recognized for what we think is the core of our practice, and it is very honored to be in such fine company with this prize being given to so many peers over these many years. Thank you so very much.
Thank you, Mette. Thank you for this inspiring lecture. Yes, and welcome in the Global Award community. Of course, yes.